We are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is the former Rhode Island long snapper. I'm giving you a compliment.
It's the first time you've actually introed me properly. No, I'm just kidding. I don't even think you've ever brought that up once in the 20 or so episodes we've done this show. I forget I was a long snapper sometimes, if I'm being completely honest.
Well, the reason I bring that up is, listen, so I did give you a proper compliment, only to give you a negative one. I saw you quote tweet. Somebody said, who's the best athletes on the football field? And for my guy said, long snappers.
I said, we all know the answer is long snapper. It absolutely is. Obviously, I was joking. I was trying to drive engagement because a lot of my followers, this might surprise you, Blake, are long snappers. I have a lot of college long snappers who follow me. So I was trying to drive a little bit of it.
The Michael Jordan of long snappers?
Definitely no, because I was not good enough to make it to the NFL, but I'm the McAfee of long snappers. I like to say that much because, I mean, I don't know any other former long snappers that are out here in the media making a name for themselves.
I don't either. I don't even know a long snapper other than you. I mean, some of the guys I played with, but one of them owns 72 Domino's in the local South area.
Oh, he's kicking my ass. Oh, he's running laps around me. That's way better.
I mean, maybe not 72. I think it's more like 5, but nevertheless, I mean,
that's a big difference.
Yeah, very big difference. But 5 is still massive. I mean, it's still very massive. I mean, one bite, everybody knows the rules. #Portnoy. But anyway, nevertheless, it's good to be back, Joe. We had to miss yesterday just due to some scheduling conflicts. Had a great weekend. Sunday, took my son Ben fishing. Was absolutely fun. He had a great time. But it's good to be back here on the Ruffino and Joe show to talk some college football. So we won't really waste anything. Joe, there was a kind of a bit more newsier last 2 days. Mm-hmm. Nick Saban talks NIL and the potential of federal legislation with, I'm quoting, his buddy, Tommy Tuberville. And then you had, I guess – people, I think, are a little bit overblowing this Steve Sarkisian thing, talking about Arch Manning and Quin Ewers and their battle here. We'll talk on them as well. And what spring quarterback competitions are we most looking at this spring? So a lot that we have to get to here tonight.
Yep.
It's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a really good show.
Yeah. I'm more excited about, or not more excited. I'm very excited about the quarterback battle discussion because spring ball is kicking off for those that maybe aren't as focused on the college football calendar as we might be. And I remember back to those days. I don't know what southeastern Louisiana, the weather would be like in March.
I mean, it's 80 degrees right now. If they give
March.
Yeah, it's 80 degrees right now.
Dude, I froze my ass off in March in college in Rhode Island. It was like maybe 40. It would snow sometimes during practices. It was unbearably terrible to practice. So that makes me very mad that you got to practice in 80-degree weather.
I'm not trying to make a political statement here, but it's the warmest March that we've ever had in a week span. So I guess #global warming. But nevertheless, I mean, it was – Joe's hot. I mean, April, it's either going to rain or it's going to be really hot down here. And so – it's a big advantage when teams like Utah come down to Florida and play. And I'm serious when I say that. Like, yeah. I really am serious. So, yeah, it was always really hot. I mean, the humidity in the South is really bad. So it's not just hot, but you're sweating all over the place. You sweat in places you never know that had sweat that could come out of it. So, nevertheless, it was always really fun. So, yes, spring is kicking off. So let's do this, Joe. Yep. Since we have 3 massive topics that we need to discuss, let's get into them. But not before we talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. A lot of bets are coming out, over-unders, win totals, and stuff like that. Who do you believe is going to win the Heisman? You can go over to betonline.ag today and place your first sports bet by using that promo code BELIEVE50 at checkout. So let's do this. Let's take our first and only break of the day. We got so much we got to talk about. Look, I think I'm going to tee off on Saban to start off the show, and he deserves it. So let's get into it. We'll back in 50 seconds. Talk some Nick Saban, Alabama, Quin Ewers, Arch Manning, and who's going to win these QB battles in spring, Joe.
Yes, sir.
BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag.
We're back.
And we're talking about Texas and Quin Ewers and the Longhorns in this episode. So fitting to have that in there every single time we come back.
I was thinking about this today when I was pitching the topics to you. We talk a disturbing amount about Texas. Way too much. Way too much.
Hey, so hold on. So listen, I don't come up with the topics.
That's true.
Okay.
That's true.
So if you want to not talk about Texas, okay, but they're in the news.
I know that's the problem, is that they're always going to be in the news. Like Notre Dame and Alabama are always going to be in the news. And honestly, the news of there being a quarterback battle is a pretty big headline, and we're going to get to that after the Saban thing. But it is funny how fitting that drop is for today's show.
Well, and I mean, look, Texas, they just, like you said, they make so many headlines, but not more than today's news from Nick Saban. In case you missed it, Nick Saban came out today and had some pretty interesting things, Joe, to talk about NIL. So let me start off by saying two things can be true at once, right? I do believe Nick when he says that he supports players making money. I do believe him when he says that. But today he came out with a statement saying, and I'm quoting him here, these collectives are creating a quote-unquote pay-for-play environment, and guys are going to schools where they can make the most money. Well, Joe, let me start off here by saying, Nick, you created it. Literally a month ago, you went on, well, not literally you went on, but you recorded a video that Alabama, the University of Alabama, dropped about your collective. And Joe, I hate the argument, well, Blake, he's got to do it to keep it up with today's environment. Well, the truth is, if you believe something so much, then no, you don't have to do it. You don't have to have a collective. I'm old enough to remember in 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, until he left LSU, and then when he picked it right back up at Alabama, that Nick Saban was paying players underneath the table, okay? The old sentiment of Alabama players committing to Alabama, signing with Alabama, and a challenger or Dodge Charger being out in their front yard is kind of one of the more unwritten things that we know about Nick Saban in Alabama. What does Nick Saban mean by? What does he mean by it's creating a pay to play? Nick, you've been doing it for well over 2 decades. I agree with him. There needs to be federal legislation on some of the stuff when it comes to NIL. But at the same time, you can't stop capitalism, but there's got to be guardrails. However, Nick Saban doesn't need to be the mouthpiece in this.
No.
The reason he doesn't need to be the mouthpiece is simply due to the fact that he's cheated everywhere he's been. Now, I'm an LSU dude. I'll tell you he cheated. Every LSU fan in here that will come in here, and everywhere Nick Saban has been, they will tell you that he's cheated. So is everybody else. It doesn't really matter. It is an open playing field. But it's really comical to me that Alabama releases their collective this past year. They have 7 5-stars that sign with the University of Alabama. And it's, to me, Joe, I just feel like when Saban opens his mouth about NIL, I really feel like it's like a scenario where a smoker is telling another smoker not to smoke because it gives you cancer, right? Like, you can't tell me what to do when you're doing the same things.
Well, Blake, I agree with you on everything you said, but then that last bit there, it did kind of make me think a little bit. I don't agree with this point, but it just kind of makes me think a little bit. Maybe he actually is the right person to talk about it because he's the one who's done it so much to an unfair advantage, that when he leaves, he wants college football to be a much more fair environment. It's kind of like
stand on your principles,
right.
right?
That's a good point. I'm this is very just a stupid take. I'm just throwing out the perspective of maybe why he's approaching it this way. It's kind of like when the CIA or the FBI hires criminals to then help find other criminals that did the same thing.
This isn't white collar.
But to your point exactly, it's weird. You read the article that Sports Illustrated put out, and if you ignore everything that you just talked about, it's a great article. It's a lot of great stuff that Nick Saban says, and it sounds like he really has a moral need to make changes in college football. And you're like, yeah, Nick, you're 100% right. These kids are not making the right decision, because I agree with a lot of what he said. We've got a lot of guys that are just picking to go where the money is.
They've been doing that though.
Yes, and it's now even more out in the forefront. It is now more exposed. And I think that it creates a very horrible future for a lot of guys that are just getting paychecks, and you don't even know if some of these guys are graduating. You don't even know if they're majoring in something that's going to set them up to get a career after football. But the sad reality of it is that Nick Saban is the biggest freaking hypocrite in the world, because he's the one who's talking about it. Is there somebody else who could talk about it? Like, is there anyone else that could talk about it?
The NCAA president or Greg Sankey or whoever it may be.
That was the thing that irked me in the article. So Saban says in the article that the NCAA unfairly is held accountable for this. What are you talking about? They're the ones who are supposed to be handling this, not Nick Saban.
Correct. And like we've talked about this whole offseason so far, they're going into federal court and getting their asses handed to them because, Joe, at the end of the day, it's capitalism.
Yeah.
And you can't stop it. But at the same time, it's just so hypocritical to me that he can say this, all of this. I'm trying to make college football better. No, the frick you're not. You're literally Joe, he's complaining because of what he's still butthurt by what happened with A&M. Okay? Like that is, if you take the blinders off for just 1 minute, okay, and see what he's really talking about.
Yeah.
That's what he's talking about. Nick Saban doesn't care about players getting paid. He's been doing it. Joe, I know of dudes that they pay $200, $300. One kid I know that they paid $350,000 worth of just under the table money. And then they gave, there's rumors that Saban gave $100,000 of his own money to a Heisman Trophy winner to come back. And this is all before NIL. So what do you mean to tell me that you haven't been doing it? I think it's so hypocritical for you to go to him and say, Nick, what do you think about this? And him saying, NIL is bad. There's no regulations. Well, the reason that we've all gotten here into where recruiting is such a big thing, while 247 on 3 Rivals, Yahoo, AYSSnetwork.com makes as much money as they do, is due to the simple nature that people love recruiting. And the way that happens is there's so much money being circulated into it. In my opinion, he just has no business talking about it. He's a hypocrite. And Nick is always finding something to complain. And I feel like, Joe, he's just in a spot where it's always with Nick a get off my lawn moment. And quite honestly, I'm getting a little sick and tired of him literally talking about it all the time, okay, and not doing any actions behind it. So there's so many times in life where people say, I might tell you, Joe, I want to stop doing X, Y, and Z. I want to get healthier. I want to lose weight. But then I go out and eat, a Caniac from Raising Cane's, or I go to In-N-Out Burger and I get the triple stacker or Whataburger. And I say, you know what? I really want to lose weight. But at the same time, I'm going out here and eating like dog crap. So my point is, you can't argue and complain and moan and groan and NIL and then go out there and do it yourself. You just can't do that. To me, it's and he gets a pass so many times because he's Nick Saban. You know who's not talking about it in his division? Kirby.
No.
Why isn't Kirby talking about it? You know why Kirby's not talking about it? Because the truth be told, Kirby's whipping that ass and taking names like his name is the Water Boy. So he's not going to say anything. Brian Kelly, Lincoln Riley, Marcus. Well, maybe a little bit Marcus Freeman, but his is a different situation. You just get what I mean with him. Mario Cristobal, Billy Napier. None of these other coaches are talking about it because they know it gets them a better chance of having a more equal playing field. You know what the number one team in the country, Joe, the number one team in the country that spends the most money in amount in recruiting, do you know who it is?
No, who is it?
Georgia. I wonder why Kirby's not saying anything, right?
Yeah, exactly. But here's my main thing, and it kind of goes in line with what we discussed on the Saturday show about him complaining about the schedule. I mean, like the reality of it is Nick's just turning into a grumpy old man.
Grumpy old man.
As much as I want to sit here and get mad at some of the things that he's saying, I almost am at the point where, like you're saying, you're sick of it, and I understand why. I almost take it with a grain of salt because it's like he's an old fart. He is a grumpy old man, and he's gotten to this point where he's going to complain about everything. Everyone's got a grandfather, and they complained. They all complain. It's too hot. It's too cold. I'm too hungry. I'm not hungry enough. Like
Nick Saban reminds me of a dude that wears a cargo sweater inside his house all day.
He's turning into that. Like, that's the reality of it. As much as we can sit here and get upset over it, and it's justified with the magnitude of some of the things he gets upset about, but he's just a grumpy old guy. I don't know why he willingly keeps talking about these things, though. That's the weird thing.
That is a fantastic point. Why do you think that is? Why is he actively being the one that's the face of it? Joe, you know what it's not fixing? Let me just say this. I talked to an SEC coach today on my way home. And we just kind of started talking about it. You know how I get when I start talking to these coaches, and I'm in there and I'm talking about what you think about what Saban said. And you know what this SEC coach told me today? Well, he better worry about not committing penalties against LSU, Tennessee, and Texas. Right? And so I'm like, you bring up an interesting point. We've talked about that before. What are you doing? Everybody's saying that Kirby, your predecessor, your number 2, has knocked you off the pedestal. Why don't you try to get back on there besides bitching about NIL? And Joe, it would be one thing. It would literally be one thing if his recruiting classes were outside the top 5. I'd be like, damn, man. Yeah. Like, they really are feeling it. Joe, he almost broke Texas A&M's composite score.
Yeah, they finished with the top recruiting class. It is goofy. If it was a different coach, just a random one to throw out there, like if it was like Marcus Freeman or whoever Stanford just hired, like for example, like schools like that don't usually put out a lot of NIL money.
Well, I mean, look at Lane Kiffin. Look at Lane. Lane literally in a post game after Texas A&M called Jimbo a clown for what he's doing in recruiting. And I will be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Lane Kiffin. Okay, I think he's a great offensive coach, but at the same time, he's not wrong. He's been going, Joe. He literally, Ole Miss had to start a collective just to pay him because of the way that Mississippi laws are dictated, and now he's got to use that in recruiting, and he's not having any success.
Right. I just whoever is allowing Nick Saban to keep talking about scheduling, about NIL, what's next? What's the next thing that he's going to be complaining about? He has consistently been put in these situations to talk about this stuff, and I know that he should be a go-to voice for college football in general because of his history as a head coach, but I just don't understand it, man. Like, why is he complaining about everything?
I don't know. And last week he's talking about the permanent opponents. Right.
Right. That's my point, is that it's this most recent thing.
Well, and I'm like, Nick, why are you complaining that you're playing your 3 biggest rivals? Regardless if you believe it or not, you're going to have to play LSU because of what you did, leaving LSU, going to Miami, then going to Alabama, and the absolute dogfights that LSU and Alabama have had. And Alabama's come out on top more than not. Okay, they lost this year. Okay, well, sounds good. LSU won in 19. It's been a little bit more back and forth over the last couple of years. But regardless of that, it's the SEC's most gross watched game. Okay, it's not even remotely close. Then you got Auburn in the Iron Bowl, and then you got Tennessee. Those are your 3 biggest rivals, Joe. And he's
right. That's also his own doing, is that you're the best team over the past decade and a half. You're going to have to play in the most important games every single year. It comes with the territory. And then here we are now. That's his
No
own
doubt.
doing. It's his own doing. And then
Well,
NIL, the same thing. It's his own doing that the way things currently are because of his actions as a head coach and how he has approached recruiting.
Well, and again, to go back to Kirby, you don't see Kirby complaining about having to play, a 9-game schedule and having the 3 permanent opponents. Joe, he's not going to. Georgia's
Who
not.
did Georgia get? I don't think Georgia got as bad of a draw.
I don't necessarily remember. I'll go and look at it right quick. But they don't have Vandy and Kentucky every year anymore. They don't go to Missouri any. Their schedule's getting tougher. And you know what the only thing I see out of Georgia? A little bit of guys getting drunk after a national title game. One of them was a horrible incident. Don't get me wrong. But then you got Stetson Bennett pissing on a brick. Okay, hiding from police behind a dumpster. Okay, so what Stetson Bennett did, who really cares? I mean, look, come on, we've all done it. So I just don't know, man. I just don't know anymore. But like I said, I do think that 2 things can be true at once, right? And of those 2 things being true at once, I do agree with him. There's got to be some legislation, but I just don't know if Nick Saban's the right face for it, right? Like,
right,
just not the right face for it. You know who I think it should be? And I gave him flack our last episodes. I think a guy like a Marcus Freeman, or maybe even letting an ex-retired head coach be the face of it. Somebody that's out of the game, right?
I guess Tuberville's technically that guy because he's in.
I'm glad you brought that up because he said, my buddy Tommy Tuberville is going to save the day.
I'm sure that part of him backing this is a relationship with Tuberville. And I do agree with you that there has to be somebody else that we can go to for this. I don't know if an active sitting head coach is the person I want talking about it, but my main takeaway, separate from Saban complaining, is that we do absolutely need federal legislation. We need something in place, and then we need something that the NCAA can then work off of to put restrictions in place and parameters in place so that teams can be held accountable. Because right now we don't have that.
You know what the only thing that I hate about NIL is?
What?
I don't get my stupid video game anymore. That's what I hate.
Well, it's coming back eventually.
Well, they said 2023, 2024. Now it's like 2025. I mean, I just got to continue to wait. To your point, Georgia's 3 permanent opponents are going to be Auburn, Florida, and Kentucky. So they don't get Vandy. They don't get South Carolina. They don't get those teams that they normally beat down on, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not going to face those teams. So I think that's ultimately a plus. So look, Saban's going to continue to be him. He's not going to stop. You know what's even more wild, Joe? He's the only head coach in the SEC that doesn't have a Twitter account. Did you know that?
Well, so that was the other thing I was thinking about too, is that Nick just puts these things out into the ether, and then he has no idea that we're all we're all getting mad about it. He has no idea.
Here's what I ultimately believe. I think that Nick Saban has a Twitter account. Okay, I really do believe that, and I think that he's looking at all of it.
No, there's no shot. I doubt he even knows how to use his phone. Come on,
dude. He's so much of a narcissist and such a control freak that you can't tell me somebody at the University of Alabama is not getting paid $100,000 to update him on Twitter.
I'm sure he's got an assistant that
makes him $120,000 a year to be his towel boy. That is confirmed. I'm not making that up. You do know that, right? Yes, he does.
How do I get that job?
I don't know, but I applied. I'll throw every purple and gold. Well, no, I mean, I make that amount of money now, but nevertheless, I mean, look, you're a towel boy. I mean, that's crazy.
Still making $120,000. I mean, I guess there's no way. There's no going up from there, No,
not really. I mean, I was Saban's towel boy for a year, No, I wouldn't do that. All right. So let's get over this dude. All right. So interesting thought. So one of Saban's ex-offensive coordinators, Steve Sarkisian, had some really interesting words. Now, if I'm not mistaken, they started spring football on Saturday. And Sark was quoted about Quin Ewers and Arch Manning. Now, I will admit, I went and listened to the press conference today. I don't know where he said that there was an open competition. What he said is that every position on the field is open until further notice.
Yes.
Joe, he didn't specifically say Quin Ewers and Arch Manning. So now that the media has twisted his words and says, there's a quarterback battle at Texas. Joe, it didn't take 2 months of Arch Manning being on that campus before there was already a QB controversy.
I thought part of the quote that I saw separate from the press conference, he said something along the lines of, and I'll pull it in a second, something along the lines of that he's not going to deprive Arch the opportunity to compete for the job or something like that.
Well, yeah, because he was asked specifically on it, but he didn't come out there and say we have a QB competition.
Yes.
But here's
it's typical media pull out of context. Arch Manning. Oh, look at all the SEO. Look at all the run that we're getting. But it is a conversation, though. You know, it is something that even if Sark's not going to openly say it, and I don't think Sark is one of those coaches that is going to publicly go on the podium and try to motivate his quarterback through that. I do think there is a little bit of a competition. I'm sure that Quin has a huge edge, but I'd be willing to bet that there is at least an internal conversation of should we give Arch a legitimate shot? And I'm sure that maybe it's only like 20%, but there's probably a percent chance that Arch could start or could compete for that job.
Manning's not beating out Quin Ewers right now. You know, and look, we've had this conversation before about Arch. Joe, I just don't think he's ready. Okay. Like, I just don't think he's, and here's another thing. Are you going, if I'm Sarkisian and you've said this, not my words, yours. If Sarkisian's really going to be on the hot seat, is he going to let a first-year freshman quarterback come in here and really dictate if he's going to be hired or fired or not? Right? Like, I just can't see that. But here's the thing, though. There is one point that I do agree with you. I don't think Quin Ewers is that good of a quarterback right now. I think that he's got to get a lot better. Joe, he's going into year 3, okay? Mm-hmm. And he's been around, meaning Ewers, some of the best offensive minds in the game. He's been around Ryan Day. He's been around Hartline. C.J. Stroud was a quarterback that was in the same room as him. He's been around a lot of really good quarterbacks, right? He goes to Texas. And for everything that I poo-poo on Steve Sarkisian about, he's a really good offensive play caller. Joe, he had some really bad outings. And I know that you will say, well, he's hurt and it's his non-throwing shoulder, and I get it. I can't get over the fact that he went 19 of 49 against Oklahoma State with 3 interceptions. He did have 2 touchdowns. Joe, he threw for 38.7% completion percentage. That is horrendous. And then you go into the bowl.
Anthony Richardson bad.
It is Anthony Richardson bad. Yes, I'm glad that you're starting to come around a little bit.
I'm not.
Against Washington, which was one of his better games, he went 31 of 47. It got a lot better, 66% completion percentage. He threw for almost 370 yards, but the only touchdown that he had, and when he was in the red zone, was on a trick play. That was his best game, and he couldn't score in the red zone. They ultimately lost the game. Here's the biggest 2 things. TCU, his defense played lights out. He went 17 of 39 for 171 yards and an interception. And the biggest victory from a margin perspective, point differential perspective, was against Kansas. He goes 12 of 21 for 107 and a TD, but Bijan Robinson had to go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, having 243 rushing yards, and Brooks had another 111. My point is that, yes, I don't think Manning is beating out Ewers to start the season, but if Quin Ewers doesn't get better, buddy, I'm just going to tell you, there's nothing that I've seen from Quin Ewers outside of a half of a quarter against Alabama that says, yeah, he can make some throws, but, Joe, he's highly inaccurate. You know who's not necessarily always highly inaccurate? Arch Manning.
Right, and that's where the redeeming qualities are for Arch, and why I think that the possibility for Arch to maybe start some games this year if things go downhill, the possibility is on the table. What Arch Manning has been lauded for is his accuracy, his consistency. He is grown up around the game, so you know that he's going to be a smart kid. But I just don't think that what I saw on tape tells me that this is a kid who steps in right away and is going to have an immediate. This is not Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was one of the most ready to made players to step onto a field and play and compete at a national championship level. One of the rarest people.
And look what happened to him against Syracuse in that year. So he got knocked out of that game.
He still even had limitations for what he was able to do. And he is one of the most ready freshman quarterbacks to step on the field and compete as a true freshman.
Right.
Here's where I stand on Quin, though. I am giving him the benefit of the doubt. There was speculation. I have no idea how true it is that he was dealing with some type of a finger issue or something along those lines that was impacting his ability to throw the football, which I'm not a quarterback. You mentioned at the top of the show that my background is a long snapper. The times that I have had issues with my fingers has significantly impacted my ability to accurately spin the football. And same thing goes for playing center. For any position that requires throwing a football in any direction, it is very hard to do if you have issues with your fingers. So if that's true, I give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt for that. Even if it's not, accuracy, I think, is something that is fixable. What is not teachable is the arm talent and the power that he has compared to Arch. I think that Quin is a far bigger playmaker than what Arch Manning brings to the table. And I think to your earlier point that you brought up with Steve Sarkisian is that he is secretly and I think quietly on the hot seat a little bit. And if things don't go well this year, things might get expedited for him being pushed out as the head coach. I'm putting out the guy that can be a gunslinger, make a big play, and get me back into a football game instead of Arch, who has no game experience. I'd rather ride with the guy who has the game experience. And it's not like we're sitting here. This isn't like a Drew Pine versus Sam Hartman. That's not the best example, but it's not like we're pulling with like a guy who's probably going to be a backup. This is a guy who was one of the top recruits in his class, one of the most talented quarterback recruits to ever come out. He's got the skills, but he does need some refinement. I do agree with that.
I'm going to push back on one thing. Accuracy can be fixed to some degree, but not a high degree. Okay. Against Washington, he had some drops, and I'll give him that. But Sark pulled him for Hudson Card a couple of times. If the finger was an issue, then I think you would have saw Hudson Card. Okay. And I don't think that, like when you're going up against TCU and he's 17 of 39, or Oklahoma State when he's 19 of 49, if there's a finger issue and you're getting your ass beat and he's throwing for 3 interceptions, then I go to a situation where, in my mind, well, then Steve Sarkisian's got a lot of explaining to do. Okay. So you either he's hurt or he's not hurt, or he can play or he can't play. And if he can't play, then and you're hurting your team, which is what he was doing.
But I would argue a hurt Quin Ewers gives you more value than Hudson Card. Like Hudson Card,
Joe, there's fine. Joe, there's no way. Now you're having some blind allegiance because 38.7% completion percentage is neutering your team, not hurting, neutering. You ever took a dog to a pound and had their balls cut off? You're neutering your offense when your quarterback has 49 passing attempts. Joe, they drop back 61 times.
Well, it's also like when you have a very talented shooter in basketball. If a guy's out of rhythm, you're not pulling him out. It's only going to do worse.
But Joe, when he's that ineffective, you got to tell him to stop shooting and pass the ball.
I mean, that's true. It doesn't help.
This isn't Steph Curry from 3. You know who this
is? He's kind of he's a gunslinger like Steph is. Come on,
a world peace in the corner.
But the other aspect of this too, though, I also question, like a lot of the games where he struggled, they couldn't run the ball. Like the TCU game is one example where they could not get into a rhythm running the ball with Bijan, and that really took them out of it. I think that Quin, with lacking experience, he's one of those guys kind of like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, where they try to do too much. Or Daniel Jones is another really good example where those guys all have
shout out Daniel Jones and his $160 million.
Ridiculous how much money he's getting paid. They're those types of
$10 million per touchdown pass.
Again, just disgusting. I'm a Giants fan. It grosses me out. Those guys at one point or another didn't have a lot of help and were trying way too hard to hit home runs. And that's what I got.
Didn't have help though.
But they weren't able to run the ball and they were throwing the ball a lot. He is one of those guys where if things aren't opening up you see it in his play where he's like, I need to get us back into this single-handedly with a huge throw. And he makes really stupid decisions. And that's an inexperience thing. That's a lack of experience.
I'm going to raise my hand. I have a question.
Yes, Blake. What's the question?
Did Bijan Robinson not have 25 carries for 243 yards against Kansas? Did Brooks not have 11 carries for 111 yards against Kansas?
Forget the Kansas game. That's
just entertain me. Just entertain me. Did he not do that?
Yeah, they did.
He went 12 of 21 for 107 passing yards and a touchdown.
So not every single game obviously supports my argument, but the way that he played against Oklahoma State neutralized Bijan in the second half, and that was when Arch was throwing it
You know why they neutralized him? You know why they neutralized him?
Because they knew that Quin would do that. That Quin would try too hard and make mistakes and press.
I don't think that. I think if you ask Gundy and anybody on that staff, you know what I think they tell you? They know that Quin Ewers was highly inaccurate. Joe, go pop in that film. He's missing wide open dudes. He's missing second, third, and fourth reads that are wide ass open.
But I also see the inaccuracy issues as I'm making a lot of sports analogies here, as a pitcher who has the yips in a way where their confidence is low and they're in their own head and they're trying to do too much and they can't consistently deliver the ball.
Lester almost won a Cy Young with having the yips. I mean, it's
recoverable, but that's my point. Is it's recoverable. I don't want to throw out the possibility of him being an elite quarterback. He has it in him. I think he's in his head.
He has not shown you anything to use the word elite. He has not.
The traits. It's the Anthony Richardson thing all over again.
Here we go again.
It's the Anthony Richardson thing all over again.
It's a whole thing all over again. What guys, draft guys like you do, you see a big arm, you see a flashy toy, and then you say, you literally start creaming yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
But at some point, you have to understand that when daddy puts the film on and says, okay, we have a problem here, Joe.
Yeah.
I don't give two flying rips how big his arm is. I don't care if he can throw the bitch 170 yards. If you're that inaccurate, you should not play. If your finger is hurting that bad where you're going 38.7%, guess who has never had a performance where they had 38.7% completion percentage? Hudson Card. Now, so to my point is, Joe, if this continues to go on with Quin Ewers, now, I will digress a little bit on one point with you on this. He's a very young quarterback, and you can see him make developments. But again, he's going into year 3. He's been under a guy in Ryan Day. He's been under Steve Sarkisian. You cannot get better teachers. Can he? And more than likely, will he be better than last season? I agree with you, yes. But if this quarterback, if this guy right here shows up, the one that we've just been talking about, Arch Manning better get ready because they're going to throw him in the game. Because I just don't know if they have a choice, right? Like if you're Sark and your job's on the line, okay, especially when you're out here pushing referees at bowl games or media dudes at bowl games, you better start winning some football games. And Quin Ewers is not showing you anything. His big arm means nothing when you're that highly inaccurate. I told you this before the show. Give me Drew Brees. Give me Phillip Rivers. Give me Joe Burrow. Give me Russell Wilson. Hell, for crying out loud, as of right now, give me Geno Smith with the way that he looked last season. And they do not have the biggest of arms. But what do they do extremely well? They all can extend plays and are highly accurate. Okay? And in this league, you have to be accurate enough to be in a situation to make your team win. I would almost make the argument that you have two comparisons of Anthony Richardson and Quin Ewers, and the reason that their team struggled so much is because of how highly inaccurate they were.
I wouldn't necessarily.
Joe, both Texas and Florida were two of the worst teams in Power 5 in converting third downs. Their passing efficiency rate on third down when it comes to Anthony Richardson and Quin Ewers was almost to the bottom of the Power 5. They were one of some of the worst. You literally had 7 passes last season where Anthony Richardson threw it away on fourth down. That is low IQ. You know who else had some plays?
But here's the thing.
Hold on.
Yeah, okay.
You know who else had plays like that?
Quin Ewers. But here's my thing, though, Blake, that I don't disagree with those stats. Those numbers support exactly what you're saying. They both have played basically the same amount of football games and have started the same amount of football games. Inexperience is not always a detriment. It sucks when you're trying to win football games and those guys are slow to learn, but there is still room for improvement. That's my takeaway with Quin, is that I don't want to shut down the possibility of him taking that next step because he has the talent. This is not a talent devoid player. This is not a 3-star recruit. This is the number 1 quarterback in his class.
But Joe,
he is good enough to figure it out.
But at some point when those kids hit those campuses, the on-3 recruiting rankings don't mean shit.
I'm not going off of the recruiting rankings, though. I'm going off of what I've seen from tape. I'm just
talking about the 38.7%.
His high school tape. His high school tape that got him rated.
Means nothing anymore when you hit the college campus either.
But that's also in line with why I can't pick Arch, though, because I don't even know if Arch is good.
Okay, so you know what, Joe? I should have been a defensive lineman because in JV I had 7 sacks.
Did you
as
actually?
a freshman?
Did you? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit of an athlete. I told you I could still beat you in a 40, but regardless, when those asses hit seats in college, what they've done, their rating, their prospect means nothing. Okay. It literally means nothing. And I will tell you something else that you don't like to hear, because you talk about Texas recruiting. Joe, they've had a really bad problem of missing. And
they have
key positions.
And they can miss it both guys.
They could. Now, I think Arch is going to be a little bit better than Quin. That's just my opinion. Yep. Okay. So as we got about less than 15 minutes, about another 10 minutes. Joe, you want to tell everybody about Bet Online before we finish up the show with our last topic about some more spring quarterback battles?
Yes. I wish you could bet on spring quarterback battles because that would be fun. But you mentioned that Heisman odds are out. If you want to get ahead and put out a little bit of money on those Heisman odds, you should do it at betonline.ag. We all know that this show is a big fan of Michael Penix Jr. I think that if you want to get some nice long shot odds, I don't know what the odds are off the top of my head. I want to check that after the show. But I'm planning to put a little money down on Michael Penix Jr. because he could get a nice payout. And if maybe you want to bet on some other things, national championship, whatever it is, do it at betonline.ag. Use promo code BELIEVE50 to get that 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online where the game starts.
I don't know who Nick's talking about. He says Mike Farrell level arrogance. What does that mean?
Mike Farrell once said that I think that this is what this is referencing. It's that he said that
comment.
Yeah, I don't know how that relates to what we were talking about.
I think you said. I think you said because it's not like he's a 3-star, but
I'm saying that it's not like Quin was a 3-star. That I don't know. I'm not sure what that's referencing.
Yeah, I don't really know what that means. All right, so John, I'm going to give you the floor first. There are some QB battles that are out and about right now. I'll give you the floor first. What spring quarterback battle are you most focused on right now?
So I took a different angle with this, Blake, because it's so easy to sit here and do the Georgia one, to do the Alabama one, to do the Ohio State one, and they're very important for the landscape of college football. But I would argue some of these smaller reported on ones that have freshman quarterbacks in the mix, I think could actually really make or break the race for various conferences. The two that caught my attention the most, in my eyes, that have freshmen in the mix. The first one is Tennessee. And I know that it's a resounding thought that Joe Milton, the Michigan transfer, is going to be the starter for Tennessee. He got beaten out by Hendon Hooker, and we know that Joe Milton has one of the biggest arms in college football. He's played in 17 games. I didn't know this. He's got 12 touchdowns, no interceptions as a starting quarterback for Tennessee. He did only complete 59% of his passes and throwing for 1,300 passing yards with 206 rushing yards. He's got some evidence to show what he's capable of. I say watch out for Nico Iamaleava. Nico Iamaleava, man, could have been the top-rated quarterback recruit, and I think should have been the top-rated quarterback recruit. The dude can sling it at 6'6", 200 pounds. His frame's a little slight, but I would not be surprised. I think this battle has a little more potential in my eyes for a freshman to start than the Arch Quin Ewers situation, because I don't think Joe Milton is guaranteed for him to start in this position. I think that there is a chance because of the talent that this kid brings to this offense in particular. He fits perfectly with what Heupel wants.
I'm going to say that he is guaranteed the starting spot. Here's why. Because if he wasn't, they would have gone in the portal and gotten a guy from the portal.
You don't think they're that confident maybe? And at least if Joe hits, they're good. But if he doesn't, their backup option is just as good. That's how I see it.
I agree with you, but listening to Josh Heupel, okay, not going to the portal and getting a QB when everybody tells you Joe Milton stinks, which he's had 2 really good performances his last 2 games. Mm-hmm. And look, did you see the video of Joe Milton? I think Josh Dobbs was doing some QB work with him. He was at the 50, and they were like playing this goalpost game. Bing, 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 bing. We'll see. We'll just see.
But Blake, we just discounted arm talent for Quin Ewers. I'm not going to give it to Joe Milton.
No, it's an accuracy thing.
Well, he's 59% in his completion percentage, though. So he's not. It's not like he's a consistently
correct.
Accurate
He's
guy.
got to prove it. But my thing is the video that we've seen so far is that he's gotten better and more accurate. He reminds me so much of Jamarcus, with like the great value version of Jamarcus Russell. But we'll see. Joe, you know what the number one that I'm looking at? Ole Miss. Okay. Let me throw this at you.
Okay.
Did you know if I did a blind comparison on Jackson Dart and Spencer Sanders, you wouldn't know who it is? You would have no, I don't think you would. You know why? Name this quarterback. 62% completion percentage, 2,900 yards, 20 TDs, 11 interceptions.
How many rushing yards? Do you have that?
Both have 600.
That's Jackson Dart.
No, it's Spencer Sanders.
What's Jackson Dart's stat line?
Here you go. 62.4% completion percentage, 2,974 yards, 8.2 yards per attempt, 20 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions.
So
they're identical.
Oh, my God.
Joe.
That's hilarious.
They are identical. And I did not know that these 2 dudes were identical when it came to a lot of their statistics. And here's what the more interesting thing is. Spencer Sanders does have a throwing shoulder injury. The only difference that these 2 dudes have, the only difference that they have right now, Spencer Sanders has more starts than Jackson Dart does. Mm-hmm. But Spencer Sanders had more rushing attempts to score in the red zone than Jackson Dart did. Jackson Dart had less rushing attempts inside the red zone than Spencer Sanders did. It was close to 75 total rushing attempts less for Jackson Dart in the red zone than it was for Spencer Sanders. So the touchdown numbers and rushing I did take out because of the attempts that Spencer Sanders did have. Here's the more interesting thing, though, Joe, to me. Now, you do have Walker Howard that's going to sit here. I'm going to talk about him in just a minute. But if I just gave you a blind resume on Spencer Sanders and Jackson Dart from a passing perspective and just a yards perspective, you would have no idea who it is. And the more interesting thing, I would even give Jackson Dart a little bit more of an edge. Here's why. Of these 2 dudes, he played in the SEC and did it in the toughest conference when Oklahoma State did it in the Big 12.
Yeah, that's the thing I don't understand. I feel like Kiffin's a little quick to bail on Jackson Dart, which I don't like that. I thought that Jackson Dart did very good considering everything that was given to him. I thought that he did a good job. He played his role really well. I don't think Spencer Sanders is a very overhyped player. He has always been a very overhyped player. He has been an overhyped draft prospect for the past couple of seasons since he's been eligible, and he's been overhyped as like a sleeper Heisman candidate. You know what he has? He's got that one Fiesta Bowl where he beat Notre Dame, which I got to watch, and everybody has rode that into the sunset and been like, this is the guy. This is the next guy that we got to talk about. Man, I think Jackson Dart's better. I think that Jackson Dart's going to win this. Is it just because he's a goofy kid from Utah and he doesn't fit? Like, is that what it is?
Well, I think because they started the season 7-0, they would go up against Alabama, LSU, and others, and they would wind up getting beat. And I think that the wheels started falling off when I don't really think was Jackson Dart's fault.
I think it was a defensive issue.
Most of it was. But my only thing with all of this is don't tell me that you're, like I hear Ole Miss fans saying, oh my God, we brought in Spencer Sanders. But they had the same exact stat line. And by the way, Joe, I gave you Spencer Sanders' best season as a starter. I didn't give you last year when he did even worse, when he was at 57% completion percentage with 2,600 yards passing, with 17 touchdowns and 9 interceptions and 3 less games than Jackson Dart, right? So he was on pace to have a worse season last year than Jackson Dart did.
Yeah.
The only caveat with this for me, and LSU fans are going to hate me for saying this. What is Walker Howard going to do?
I don't think he's in play for next season, if I'm being completely honest. I think that he is probably the guy who takes over the following year. Because whoever wins this job goes to the NFL, most likely. The other one disappears. Whatever happens. And then Walker Howard takes over. I think that's the more
I do agree with you that I've seen Walker Howard in practice at LSU because we're credentialed there. We go there.
Dude can sling it.
Yeah.
He's slanging it.
But he's got the arm strength and he's got the accuracy and he can move. The only thing the problem that he has is he's a very, very small dude. He's really I mean, Joe, I'm 6'3", 300 pounds. To me, okay, he's not a big quarterback. So I agree with you on the Walker Howard thing. Let's see how this progresses through the spring. Let me give you this one right quick, too.
Yep.
You know what the other probably the biggest quarterback battle in the country that nobody's talking about is?
What?
Ohio State. Okay, you got Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. Who's going to take over for C.J. Stroud? Now, I will tell you why I think that this is the biggest, in my opinion, one of the biggest quarterback position battles in the country. But if Ryan Day loses to Michigan again, they might fire his ass. And you know what? He's got to get it right. And he didn't go into the portal. He didn't go and do anything. He's letting a Hartline be the new OC and call plays. Is Kyle McCord that dude? Is Devin Brown that dude? Now, I don't know if you saw this today, but Devin Brown came out, okay, and he was a former guy from Utah, 43 overall player in Utah, or 43 overall player in the country. He's also out of Utah. Devin Brown, he said that the guy that he looked up most to was Tate Martell. And I'm like, what a horrible comparison in Ohio State for you to look into.
That's like C.J. Stroud when he said, I look up to Deshaun Watson and Michael Vick, and it's like, oh no, why though? Why could just give me a third guy that's not two of those guys? But that's a weird pick. I like Kyle McCord. I really do. I really think that Kyle McCord fits much better as the next in line, and I think he's more of a natural passer. What works so well for CJ is that he's just a naturally gifted thrower of the football. And I think to work in that system, it's a one-read system. I want the guy who's the most accurate. I want the guy that's going to deliver on that first read, and I think that that's Kyle McCord. I don't need the better athlete. I need the guy who's the most consistent thrower of the football.
All right, to wrap this up as we end the show here, what's your last one, Joe, that you're looking forward to?
My last one's UCLA. I don't think that one is getting enough attention, and it's another, again, a freshman battle here where I don't think Ethan Garbers is in this. He's brought up in some articles, but he's not in it. Dante Moore, who, like Nico Iamaleava, should have been ranked higher, was a highly sought-after kid, last-second switch to UCLA, which was a sneaky big pickup, is competing with Colin Schlee, who transferred from Kent State. Now, Colin Schlee has had an okay career. 2,400 passing yards, 59% completion percentage, 13 passing touchdowns to 5 interceptions. He did fine. We know that there was a lot of offensive production at Kent State. But I think that if there is a freshman with the highest likelihood to start, it is Dante Moore. I think that that offense is structured and set up for a freshman to walk in and have a very surprising season. I don't know why it pops in my head of thinking like what Bo Nix did in his first year. I feel like that Dante Moore can do that plus more. I think that Chip Kelly is a great offensive mind, and Dante Moore is perfect for the scheme that he's looking to call. He is a better version of, he has the potential to be a better version of Dorian Thompson-Robinson in my eyes.
I think he's a better thrower, overall thrower.
Yeah.
Without question. All right, Joe, we will be back tomorrow to get everything. I don't know what our topics are yet. I guess we'll talk about that tomorrow, and then we'll go from there. But a fantastic show, fantastic day. I know everybody in the state of Texas hates me. The guys at the Charity Stripe said that they're going to bring me on. I still have not heard from them. But nevertheless, great show, buddy, and we'll be back tomorrow. We'll see everybody soon. Till then, peace out, Girl Scouts.